Hello and welcome to Sipz and Stories. My name is Elizabeth, and in today's video I will be discussing my TBR for middle grade March along with the books that I recommend for each of the 5 challenges this year. What is middle grade March? Middle grade March is a fantastic month here on BookTube where we all just give ourselves permission to read kids' books, to read quality children's literature, especially middle grade, which is specifically written for kids between the ages of about 7 or 8 to 12 to 13, so pre-YA. And I find that a lot of my favorite books fall into the middle grade category, and a lot of my favorite booktubers love children's literature just as much as I do. It is organized every year by Krista from Books and Jams, Katie from Life Between Words, and Amanda from On the Middle Shelf. I will link their channels below. They're all fantastic. They all have great recommendations, along with their official middle grade March channel and their announcement video if you would like to participate. I love children's literature so much, and these are the books that I am super excited to read this year, along with books that I absolutely love and cannot wait to recommend to all of you. So grab your favorite beverage as I discuss some of my favorite middle grade books. The group pick this year is a lot of fun. It is The Mona Lisa Vanishes by Nicholas Day. I absolutely love this book. I'm almost finished reading it, and it is absolutely fantastic. The girls just really have a knack for picking fantastic books for the group pick, and this one is no exception. It is the first nonfiction book that they've ever picked as the group pick, and it is wonderful. Nicholas Day is such a fantastic writer. He has such witty sense of humor, really tongue-in-cheek sense of humor. I think kids and adults will love this one. It also has amazing illustrations by the excellent illustrator Brett Hellquist, peppered throughout the book. So it's just a real winner. I think this one is winning like all sorts of awards. And now that I've read it or I'm reading it, I understand why, because it is amazing. It kind of tells the story of the disappearance of the Mona Lisa, how it was stolen. That is why the Mona Lisa is famous today. Not because Leonardo da Vinci painted it, but because it was stolen. And it was kind of one of the first stories in history to go viral around the turn of the century in Paris. And it does. The story kind of flip-flops from when the Mona Lisa is stolen in the early 1900s in Paris, all the police officers that are involved, all the technology like fingerprinting that is brand new at the time, and then people like Pablo Picasso or J.P. Morgan that are kind of involved in the Mona Lisa. It also flip-flops back into Renaissance Italy, and you learn a lot about Leonardo da Vinci and Lisa herself, the woman that inspired the Mona Lisa. So fantastic book. I love it so much. And again, another winner for middle grade March. All right, challenge number 1 is to read a book with a one-word, single-word title. Again, their challenges are a lot of fun because they're easy to adapt to your own unique reading taste. The book that I plan to read for this challenge is Framed by James Ponti. I want to read this simply because I love James Ponti. He is probably my favorite middle grade author that is currently writing today. He is a genius. I love him. His books are adventurous. They have a lot of heart to them and a lot of humor. I especially love his City Spies series. I think if you are a fan of James Bond, you will love that series. It's like James Bond for kids and involves these kids that work for MI6. They live in this castle in Scotland, and every book is about a different character. Love that series so much, and I'm really looking forward to reading this other series by him, the Framed series, that takes place more here in America. This one is about a little boy named Florian Bates, and he teams up with the FBI to solve a mystery of how this painting has been stolen from the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. So again, I thought this one paired very nicely with The Mona Lisa Vanishes, and the fact that it's by James Ponti, one of my favorite middle grade authors, means that this book is definitely going to be a 5-star read. I already know that for sure. Another one I'm excited to read is Echo by Pam Munoz Ryan, and I think this is going to be my audiobook pick for middle grade March. The ladies have all said that this is a fantastic audiobook, and I think it has something to do with this magical harmonica and how it makes its way to all these different people throughout history. I really trust Pam Munoz Ryan's writing. Her book Esperanza Rising is also a fantastic middle grade book. Love that one so much. So I am looking forward to this, and it'll be nice to listen to an audiobook of this as well. All right, let's talk about some of my recommendations for this challenge. My first recommendation is hands down Holes by Sachar. This is my all-time favorite middle grade book. It really, to me, represents the best in the middle grade genre. It's been around for 15, almost 20 years now, and I remember it was really big when I started teaching. And when I first read it, I was blown away by Holes. And to this day, it really represents the best of children's literature. Not only is it funny, it's whimsical, it's got slapstick humor, but it is also a story full of heart, and it teaches a very important lesson to kids, but again, with a sense of humor. And I haven't read this book in years, but it's all coming back to me. Camp Green Lake, Sploosh, Yellow Spotted Lizards, Stanley Yellowgnats is spelled the same forward as backwards. Love this book so much, and I give it the God's thumb up. You've got to read Holes by Sachar. Another book that I really recommend for this category is Skellig by David Almond. Oh my gosh, I love this book so much, and I do recommend it to anyone out there that thinks they're too cool for school for kids lit, doesn't want to read a children's book, thinks that's beneath them. Take my advice, go pick up Skellig, read it, and tell me that this is not one of the best, most poignant, most well-written stories that you have ever read. Right? Am I right? Those of you that have read it, it's amazing. It's about this little boy named Michael, and it starts out Michael's mother has just given birth to his baby sister who is premature. So you really don't see the mother or the baby sister. They're in the hospital. But Michael has been pulled out of school by his father, and his father is kind of a recluse. He really isn't talking to Michael. Both of them, the father and Michael, are just kind of trying to process this with the baby sister on their own. And Michael's father is busy doing renovations to the house. He's kind of becomes obsessed with this house that they live in. And Michael, since he's pulled out of school, is just roaming around the neighborhood. He ends up becoming friends with a next door neighbor named Mina, and together they discover this man, this homeless man named Skellig, who is living in their garage. And, you know, he's not scary. He's just kind of this cantankerous homeless guy that's just hanging around. And Michael does not want to upset his father. So he just ends up bringing Skellig food and talking to him. And throughout the course of the book, you really learn who or what Skellig is. It's amazing. I love this book. I love the multiple interpretations for this book. It's so stunning. The writing is phenomenal. And for all you Harry Potter fans out there, this book was the inspiration for the character of Hedwig the owl in Harry Potter. Challenge number 2 is to read an author's debut novel. So it does not have to be a debut novel from this year, 2024. It just has to be an author's debut novel, maybe one of your favorite author's debut novels. And for me, I'm a little ashamed to admit this, but I have never read this book, and that is because of Winn, Dixie by Kate DiCamillo. When I think of children's literature and I think of middle grade, I think of Kate DiCamillo. She is basically royalty in children's literature. She can do no wrong. Literally everything this woman touches turns to gold. She can write animal stories. She can write heartfelt children's stories. She can write comic books, right, with Flora and Ulysses. She can write early reader books, the Mercy Watson series. And I think she's even dipped her toe into picture books as well. But I'm ashamed to admit it, I have not read Because of Winn, Dixie. This book has been out for, I want to say, at least 20 years. It's her debut novel. It's arguably her best. I just started reading it. I'm almost done. It's fantastic. And it reminds me a lot of her Three Rancheros series, which I absolutely love. I love stories of children that are set in the South. So this does feel like something like Fried Green Tomatoes or the Yaya Sisterhood, but for kids. That's why I really love Kate DiCamillo's Southern fiction. And this one tells the story about Opal and her single father, who is a minister. And she discovers this stray dog one day at the local Winn-Dixie grocery store, just all of the adventures that ensue. Beautiful book. It's full of heart. It's poignant. And, you know, what was I thinking not reading this sooner? Another debut book that I'm really excited about is Mandy by Julie Edwards. Don't be fooled by that name. Julie Edwards is really Julie Andrews, famous for The Sound of Music and Mary Poppins, among other things, Broadway. And this is her debut novel for kids. And don't you just like Julie Andrews a little more now that you know that she's written a children's book? Doesn't she just seem like a person that would have written a children's book Exactly. So that's why I'm excited to read this. And Mandy is supposed to be a lot like classic stories such as The Secret Garden, Little Women. It sounds very similar to The Secret Garden. It's about a little girl named Mandy who lives in an orphanage. And one day she climbs over the wall, she goes out into the woods, and she finds this abandoned little cottage, and she kind of decides to become the caretaker of the cottage and plant flowers there and just hang out there and, you know, have adventures there. Looking forward to this one. I'm not expecting it to be brilliant because Julie Andrews is first and foremost a famous singer, a famous actress, but I do think this is going to be charming because she is a charming person. All right, let's talk about my recommendations for a debut novel. This one would be Rooftoppers by Katherine Rundell. I am loving Katherine Rundell. She is really exploding right now in the children's literature genre. Her book, Impossible Creatures, was just released in the UK. It's set to be released here in the United States in the next couple of months. And she is just being compared to like the next J.K. Rowling, the next Philip Pullman. And she's super smart. She went to Oxford. She's in that kind of tradition of like C.S. Lewis, Tolkien. And this is her debut novel, Rooftoppers, and it is so charming. It's about this little orphan girl named Sophie, and Sophie goes to Paris right around the time when the Mona Lisa was stolen in the early 1900s, and she and her caretaker are on this search for her long-lost mother. She ends up meeting up with all these children that live on the rooftops of Paris, and they're called Rooftoppers, and they have all these adventures. It's very Dickensian. It reminds me a lot of Oliver Twist, which I recently read. I love this one, and Impossible Creatures is definitely on order now from Blackwell's. I cannot wait to get my hands on that book. Another reason I love Katherine Rundell is she has written this essay about children's literature. It is called Why You Should Read Children's Books Even Though You Are So Old and Wise. And I picked this up at Heifer's in Cambridge, and I love this essay. It's basically a very short essay about why she thinks adults should continue to read children's literature. So I think everyone that's participating in Middle Grade March will love this, is because she's saying you're not crazy to read children's book. In fact, more adults should read children's literature because it is the purest form of literature that we have. It really represents the truth. When you're writing for kids, you have to tell them the truth. You can package it in these whimsical stories, but you're preparing them to be adults. You're preparing them for life. So these books have got to be good. And usually children's literature is on the pulse of what's currently happening in the culture. Love this book so much. It is one of the best essays about children's literature that I have ever read. The next person that's written the most about children's literature is C.S. Lewis. So it's at that level. If you love all C.S. Lewis's essays about books and reading and children's literature, you will love this essay by Katherine Rundell. She is amazing. Challenge number 3 is to read a story about an immigrant or a refugee. I think the ladies from Middle Grade March always like to push us as readers to kind of read outside of our comfort zone. Love this challenge, and I have read a lot of books in the refugee category, a lot of which I am happy to recommend coming up. But usually the books are about kids from third world countries that move to more Western countries. And so I thought I would mix things up a little bit and read While I Was Away by Waka T. Brown. And this is kind of a reverse immigrant story. So this is about a little girl named Waka. Again, I'm guessing it's based on the author's life. And one year during middle school, her parents sent her back for a year to Japan to live with her maternal grandmother and to go to school in Japan so that she can learn about the culture that she comes from. I thought that sounded really interesting because it's supposed to be about how she goes from being this very smart girl in America, the top of her class, to being this fish out of water in Japan. Suddenly she is not the top student anymore. Suddenly she has to learn the language. She doesn't know how to write the characters, the kanji characters. This sounded amazing, and I'm really looking forward to this book. All right, one of the books that I have to recommend is Shooting Kabul by N.H. Sensei, and I think I read this one a few middle grade marches ago, I think all the way back in 2022. Love this one. This one is set shortly after 9/11, and it talks about a refugee family from Afghanistan. The main character's name is Fadi, I believe. Yes, Fadi. And Fadi's family has to flee Afghanistan. His father is an academic, a professor, and he's being recruited by the Taliban. And he's like, no way am I working for the Taliban. So he tries to have his family escape into Pakistan so that they can go to America and he can start over in America. And while they're in the convoy from Afghanistan into Pakistan, they lose track of Fadi's baby sister, Miriam. So it starts off really dramatic. They lose track of this little girl, and Fadi thinks it's his fault because he was in charge of, holding her, and he lost track of her. So he feels all of this guilt. And I'll just tell you right now, it ends on a happy tone, but the majority of the book is the family living in America in the San Francisco Bay Area and trying to track down this sister who is lost somewhere in Pakistan. And it talks about Fadi going to middle school, and this is shortly after 9/11. So of course there's a lot of racism, there's a lot of bullying because he is from Afghanistan. And then it talks about the father, who is this, academic, very smart person, but in America, the only job he can get is as a taxi driver in San Francisco. The mother is, as you can imagine, really depressed because she doesn't speak the language, she doesn't like America. She, doesn't know how to adapt to American culture. Her story is really interesting. My favorite character would have to be the older sister. I can't think of her name, but she works at McDonald's and she's a really sassy teenager, and she just kind of says it like it is about America. So I'd say that the older sister is probably my favorite character in this book, but it's full of heart. It's called Shooting Kabul because Fadi enters this photography competition, and if he can win the photography competition, he can team up with National Geographic to go on a photo shoot somewhere around the world. And he naively thinks that he can go with National Geographic to Afghanistan, which obviously would not happen, but it's just full of heart. It's really poignant, and it does explore that history of 9/11, which is already, 20 years old. I think a lot of the kids in school right now were not even born at that time. And so as someone that lived through it, we all know exactly where we were when 9/11 happened. And so it's interesting to kind of introduce kids to this topic. And this is a good book to pick for the refugee challenge. Another book that I really enjoy is The Boy at the Back of the Class by Anjali Q. Roff. And I never know if I'm saying her name right, but she is an amazing woman. Not only an amazing author, but she is a humanitarian herself. So I like to think of the author as a humanitarian first and as an author second. And she does have a lot of charities that involve refugees and the refugee crisis, especially in the Middle East. She just lives in the UK, so her perspective is from the UK. The book is about this little boy named Ahmet, and Ahmet is this little boy in the back of the class. And it's not told from his perspective, which I like. It's told from the perspective of the kids that are in class with Ahmet, and they're all wondering, who is he? Where is he from? How come he lives in foster care? Where's his parents? What's going on? How come his parents can't come into the country? So it deals with some very serious topics, but in a very humorous, light-hearted manner. It's a lot more easygoing than Shooting Kabul, but I love it. And because it's set in England, it's kind of unique too. The kids stage this whole protest. They write letters to the Queen. It's just a fun little book, and there is kind of a surprise twist at the end when you learn who the narrator is, and I was just surprised when I learned that. I was like, oh my gosh, how come I did not figure out that that was who the narrator was this entire time? Love this book so much, and I think it's a great pick for the refugee challenge. All right, the next challenge is to read a book with an animal on the cover, and I had every intention of reading this book, Pax by Sarah Pennypacker. I've had this book on my shelf for the longest time. I absolutely love it because John Klassen is the illustrator of Pax. Love John Klassen's illustrations. I would love to talk about his picture books too. My favorite is This Is Not My Hat by John Klassen, and if you're looking for quality picture books for kids, love that book, This Is Not My Hat. Oh my gosh, it's so hilarious. But that's why I decided to read Pax, and then when I actually started reading it, wow, this book was one of the most depressing children's books I have ever read. So I kind of DNF'd it. I couldn't finish it. It was too depressing. And I wasn't going to talk about it in this video, but I thought I should bring up why I didn't like this book is because it broke one of my cardinal rules of children's literature. It was just too darn preachy. It just was not fun. It was depressing. It dealt with some very serious topics. And it was basically an anti-war book packaged as a children's book. I just did not like this at all. And I should have looked at the reviews on Goodreads because a lot of people felt about this book very similar to me. Like, whoa, this is just not the vibe I was expecting from this book. It is about a little fox and a little boy that gets separated. But both the fox's story and the little boy's story is just, it's so depressing. I just did not like this book at all. So I had to switch gears a little bit and pick a new book for this challenge. So I went with Crenshaw by Catherine Applegate. And again, this is one I see all the time at elementary schools. It's one I see all the time at public libraries. And it's about a little boy and his imaginary best friend who is a cat. I know that it also deals with some heavy topics. Family has fallen on hard times. They're living out of their car. I don't know how this is going to go. But one of the blurbs on the back says that this is very fun and not sanctimonious. So thank you. I'm okay with books that deal with heavy topics that are not sanctimonious and not preachy. Don't like that in children's literature. All right, speaking of an author who has a terrific sense of humor and writes books with a lot of heart is Almost Home by Joanne Bauer. Love that cover. I'm sorry, that just screams middle grade to me. I also love how we've got this like matching thing going on with this cover. But again, Joanne Bauer is by far one of my favorite middle grade authors. And she also writes kind of like in that in-between gray area between YA and middle grade. Some of her books, such as Rules of the Road and Hope Was Here, they kind of veer more YA. And then some of her books, like this one, Almost Home, veer more middle grade. This one is also a book that deals with a heavy topic, but unlike Pax, Joan Bauer has an amazing sense of humor. She just like Kate DiCamillo, she can talk about these heavy topics, but in a lighthearted way. And I think you need that. You need a book with a sense of humor if you're going to give it to a kid. This one is about a little 12-year-old girl who goes into the foster care system. It starts out she's living with her mom, but her mom kind of has this nervous breakdown and has to go into the hospital, into rehab. And so the little girl is sent into foster care, but she has this little puppy, Shush, and she refuses to live with any of the foster families unless she can take along the dog, Shush. Obviously, that causes a problem with certain families, and her social worker is having issues with it as well. But I love this book. It doesn't have the happiest of endings. It has a real ending, I would say. It's a really good book. Highly recommend it for kids and adults. Another book that I absolutely love for the animal category is Da Vinci's Cat by Catherine Gilbert Murdoch. She is probably most famous for The Book of Boy. That one is set in the Middle Ages. That's a fantastic book for middle grade March as well. Da Vinci's Cat, though, is a lot of fun. I think especially it fits in really well with the Mona Lisa Vanishes. It's a nice book to kind of pair alongside that book. But I love that she writes these amazing historical fiction books for kids. This one is kind of similar to The Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankenweiler. I think if you love that book, you'll love this. It's about two characters, Federico, who is a little boy growing up in Renaissance Italy. He's actually based on a real life person, a real life nobleman from the Renaissance. And B is a little girl that lives here in the United States. She lives in upstate New York. Her parents are art history teachers or art history historians or something. And they have this like box from the Renaissance they got from Italy. And this cat, he comes into B's house and then she follows him into this box and she ends up going into Renaissance Italy. She ends up going back in time. It's a lot of fun. She teams up with this little boy named Federico. And at first you think it's going to be a lot about Da Vinci. It isn't. Sadly, they really don't mention Leonardo da Vinci all that much in this book, other than that he was the genius that created this box, this time travel box. But they do talk a little bit about Michelangelo, not in a positive way. Apparently Michelangelo was a bit of a jerk. The artist that you will absolutely love when you read this book is Raphael. The book is mainly about Raphael, and just there is a scene in this where Bee and Raphael sneak into the Sistine Chapel and they look up at the Sistine Chapel, and it's just such a beautiful scene. It also talks about Raphael painting the School of Athens. So while you're reading this, you're going to be like Googling all these paintings at the same time, which is good for adults and for kids. One fair warning though, when I finish this book, I think I booked a trip to Italy a couple months later. So this book is going to make you want to go to Italy. Love this one so much and highly recommend it. And the last challenge is to read a book that you feel you missed out on, or that, you never had a chance to read when it was super popular. The one I'm going to go with, there's only one I'm going to go with, is The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise, right? Like, I've seen this book literally everywhere. It's everywhere. It's at all the elementary schools I go to. It's at all the libraries I go to. I see it all the time at Target. It's like always in that section of children's books at Target. And I have just been captivated by that cover. Every time I walk past it, I pick it up, I look at it, I set it down, and this is the year that I'm finally gonna read it. I love it too because she is this like little girl sitting on top of this school bus. I'm hooked. I wanna know what this story is about. Apparently, it's about this little girl named Coyote, and the school bus is not an actual school bus. It's her house that she lives in with her father, and they go on this cross-country road trip to Washington State to go find some relic of her mother's or something. I guess her mother died in a car crash. And then along the way, they pick up all of these kooky characters along the way on their trip to Washington. And she ends up finding out the meaning of life and love and friendship, all that good stuff. It sounds amazing. I like this book just because of the cover, I admit it, but I can't wait to read this one. And the fact that it is set in Washington State and I live in Washington, I know that's a no-no. That's another reason I need to read it ASAP. Alrighty, thank you everyone for joining me for my middle grade March TBR and recommendation video. Again, I love middle grade March. I love this time of year. I love that we have permission as adults to read children's literature and not feel guilty about it, because I love kids' books. I love recommending these books to kids, but more importantly, I love reading them myself. I cannot wait to see everyone's videos for middle grade March. I know I'm going to put a lot of amazing books on my TBR this year. Thank you everyone and have a great day.